children really do have something to sing about. It's due to the hard work, flair and positive thinking of their school and surrounding community. After an Ofsted inspection flagged up lack of space as a concern, Llanlivery Community Primary in Cornwall realised it must do something to improve conditions for its reception and Key Stage 1 pupils. They tried various ways to make the most of their existing space, but it didn't solve the problem. What they needed was a whole new classroom. Unfortunately, they weren't eligible for a building project grant from their education authority. But this didn't deter the head and chair of governors. In fact, given the challenge, the whole community pulled together to plan, fund and build a state-of-the-art classroom. This is the story of how it was done.
I'm Richard Mudge. I'm head teacher here at Llanlivery School, and Llanlivery is a small school with 2 classes. We have a Victorian building that was built in 1877, so we have one larger room and one rather small, damp classroom. However, as our numbers have grown, once we'd risen to 22 children, they were rather crammed in like sardines, and we had an additional 7 children due to enter the school, and so we had a problem.
As you can see, it's very difficult teaching conditions in this classroom. We were very cramped. I was a teaching assistant at the time and working with individual children, and moving around the classroom caused a lot of problems. Clambering over children, bumping into children, constantly asking them to move.
Well, I'm a chair of governors at the school, but I actually started at the school as a pupil, and when I grew up and had children of my own, I became a parent governor. And as a governor, as a parent governor, I've always remembered problems about space within the Key Stage 1 classroom. It was flagged up eventually by the first Ofsted inspection, and we responded to that, if you like, criticism with some work to try and maximise the use of space within the school.
It's a mixed age class, so it's not just reception in there. We've got Year 1 and Year 2. So being in such a small area meant that they had to work together most of the time.
OK, children, who can spell they? Jessie.
We decided, the governors and the staff and members of the parent group, that we needed to look at this and we needed to have better accommodation for the children.
We had the option to extend the building, the existing building or room, and either upwards or outwards, and both of those options were not feasible because the building's an old Victorian building made of granite, solid granite, so it wouldn't have been possible. We looked at the possibility then of putting a building somewhere in the grounds of the school, a new building, and we looked at the option of conventional buildings, of temporary buildings, portable buildings, and we also looked at this option of timber frame, a lightweight structure that could be built very quickly, and it's actually, that was something I'd had some experience of, so that was really what we went for. The inspiration for the building, for me, came primarily from the children. I'd been asked to go up and do a session with the children with the Key Stage 1 teacher about buildings, and I took materials along and we looked at buildings and the importance of buildings not having high energy input and so on. I was amazed at how much those children knew. They're only 7-year-olds, less than 7, and they were so aware of global issues and pollution and so on. And it seemed important that we should practice what we preach.
Well, luckily it was the time when devolved capital funding was being allocated to all schools. So we had some money that we could use.
The funding for the project partly came through what they call matched funding, and this relied partly on monies raised through fundraising. We were able to contribute time and services, professional services, and the value of those services could be offset against the match funding bid. And we raised around £20,000 worth of either goods in kind, people offering discounts, or people doing work for nothing or for very low cost.
We also borrowed some money from the county council, which was interest-free, which was great. And we had a lot of hope, really.
So the school managed to raise a total of £85,000. But 10,000 of this was used for equipment and fittings, leaving actual building costs of 75,000. This would have been considerably more, perhaps up to £120,000, if they'd used conventional building techniques. Martin Penk had experience of timber frame buildings through working with his father, but they needed to recruit someone else, someone who had some professional architectural training and the necessary draftsman skills.
When we were discussing it as a governing body about, right, what we need is someone who knows something about architecture, and what a pity we don't have a governor or parent or a member of the community who does, I said, oh, well, I know someone who might be interested to come and talk to us. And that really is how the relationship with Nathan started.
I got involved with the project through the head teacher, Richard Mudge. He came up to me and said that there was a need for a new building or some new accommodation for the school, and requested if I would be interested in getting involved in designing this new project.
We kept the cost down by almost costing every decision we made about the building. We would try and run an estimate on how much material we'd need, how much it would be to put it in, labour costs, and we kept a kind of a running total of that cost. It was wrong eventually, but it wasn't a bad guide, and it also disciplined you into thinking through every decision in terms of cost.
So how do you think you want to get over this one then, Martin?
The building is too close to the old building, and because these areas of glass and timber... There wasn't a day that went by that I didn't start doubting that we were going to get through this and that it was going to happen, and we've got sleepless nights, and we used to just sit there until 2 o'clock sometimes working on the project. And we used to say, wouldn't it be great if this ever got built, sometimes not believing it ever would.
It took 11 months of mostly unpaid hard work, but at last they felt ready to submit the plans. Their plans were approved, permissions received, and in February 2003 the building could actually begin. In order to keep the costs to a minimum, the whole community rallied round. Parents, friends and governors all lent a hand. Even the children were involved, keeping diaries of the work going on around them.
Then the huge digger that looked like a giant orange monster started to dig. When they all went together, the din was so horrible that we put our hands over our ears and hoped it would stop soon.
I helped in various ways, from helping to move timber for the frames, to painting ceilings and walls, to lifting turf to put on the roof, wheelbarrowing gravel, making cups of tea, cakes, anything.
A local builder and parent, Sean Bunny, won the tender to build the new classroom.
Sean had good experience from previous work of sustainable building and methods and materials. And it's interesting actually that if we'd gone down a conventional route with the building, we probably would have been looking at figures of £1,500 a square metre. As it was, we managed to build the building for £700 a square metre. And even Sean himself, since we've finished the building and even during the building, he was amazed how quickly it was produced, how cost-effective it was.
It's taken nearly 4 years from identifying the need to creating the reality. The Victorian building links effortlessly to its new timber sister, and the children love it.
I like the new classroom because you can actually walk around without bumping into tables.
I like the cedar roof. It looks cool because it's lighter and there's more windows. You can have more games out because you can have them on the tables and on the floor.
The children really enjoyed the space in this classroom and having room to move and being able to get up out of their seats just to come and speak to either myself or another member of staff or another child, and not having to keep the noise down. They also really enjoy the decking, and during wet play times they can go out there. They don't have to be restricted to their own classroom all the time. They quite like having their own cloakroom. We had to share with the juniors before, and they do enjoy having their own space. That I think they feel quite special.
I think for me, one of the very strong aspects of having built this building is that we have used, as much as possible, a degree of sustainability. We've used local materials, we've used local people, we have considered natural materials, that are not going to be damaging to the environment.
The original decision was to use a green roof and plant grass, and we had all kinds of discussions about this from a health and safety angle and maintenance angle. Very interesting governors' meetings where we were thinking about having goats grazing on the roof and guinea pigs, and then we were talking about the buzzards eating the guinea pigs, and so we kind of thought we'll go for something that needs less maintenance, and the product sedum is now widely used for roofs. Sedum is a small succulent, small plant, and it's very tolerant of varying conditions. So if it gets dry, it doesn't matter, it survives. If it gets wet, it drains okay.
The icing on the cake has been that this distinctive timber frame classroom has won the building equivalent of an Oscar. The Land Livery team won the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors 2004 Sustainability Award. But most importantly, the children who use it really feel at home there.
I think it's been wonderful for the governors and the staff and the community in a wider context, because it's something that we've all done together and which everyone can feel proud of.
News of the award-winning classroom travelled far and wide. One thing just led to another.
We've had a great deal of praise, visitors who come love to see it, and lots of people have gone away saying, oh, I'd like one of those at my school, this might solve my problems, or oh, I just want one anyway.
It then led to several inquiries as to whether I could do more of the same. I then spoke to my colleague Nathan. I said, look, we've got a lot of work on potentially here, and so we decided to go it alone and set up a company.
Now that the hard work and building are over, just what were the most challenging aspects of going it alone?
The hardest thing, I think, is having the conviction, maintaining the conviction that you can do it. We didn't exactly have a great deal of support from the county. And for that, I don't think that was a criticism of them. I don't think they were very anxious themselves that we were spending money, and the people that were spending the money and the people that were making the decisions had very little experience. So I can understand their anxiety, but at the same time, when they're wondering why you're doing it and ask you questions that you can't answer, it starts to rattle your own confidence. So that's probably the hardest element, is to try to retain that conviction that you can do it.
It was a risk. We did probably take a risk by even undertaking the project, but I think in schools we are being encouraged to take more and more risks. One of the problems is that we are often asked to take risks that we feel we don't have the knowledge and we don't have the experience and understanding to make the right choices. I think by working with Martin Penk and with someone who was still training with regard to his architecture, we felt that their enthusiasm was there, we had trust in them as individuals, and we had belief that they would want to see the project through. And luckily those things came true.
There's something